I was 7 months pregnant, scrubbing his floors while his mistress slept in our bed. He thought I was too broken to fight back. But when his parents showed up unannounced that Sunday morning, they didn't just see the truth. They became my unexpected allies in the most savage way possible. Before we get into this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you're not going to believe how this plays out. Drop a comment right now with a fire emoji if you've ever felt invisible in your own home. Now, let me tell you how I went from doormat to done. My name is Nia, and 5 years ago, I married a man I thought was my forever. Brandon was a real estate developer, ambitious and charming, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone believe in his vision. I was a nurse, working long shifts at the hospital, but when his business started taking off, he asked me to step back from my career. Just temporarily, he said. Just until things stabilized. He needed me to manage the home, handle the administrative side of his growing company, be his support system. And like a fool in love, I said yes. For the first 3 years, it was good. We were building something together, or at least that's what I told myself every time I pushed aside my own dreams. Then I got pregnant. Finally pregnant after 2 years of trying. I thought it would bring us closer together, thought he'd be excited about becoming a father. Instead, something shifted in him. He started coming home later, started looking at me differently. The comments started small. "You're really showing already, huh?" Or, "Maybe you should watch what you're eating." I was growing his child inside my body, and suddenly I wasn't attractive enough for him anymore. By my 7th month, I could barely recognize my own marriage. Brandon was cold, distant, always on his phone. He'd snap at me for the smallest things, criticize how I kept the house even though I was doing everything while carrying his baby. I kept telling myself it was stress from work, that things would get better after our daughter was born. But then Chelsea happened. He introduced her as his new assistant at one of his company dinners. She was 24, blonde, bubbly, everything I wasn't in that moment, especially not 7 months pregnant and exhausted. The way she looked at him made my stomach turn, and the way he looked at her made my heart sink. But I smiled through dinner, played the supportive wife, and ignored the voice in my head screaming that something was very wrong. 2 weeks later, Brandon came home with an announcement that made my blood run cold. Chelsea needed a place to stay temporarily. Just for 2 weeks, he said. Her apartment was being renovated and she couldn't afford a hotel on her assistant's salary. As his wife, shouldn't I be understanding? Shouldn't I be welcoming? I tried to protest, tried to say it wasn't appropriate, but he talked over me. He said I was being emotional, that pregnancy was making me irrational and jealous. He made me feel crazy for having completely reasonable concerns about another woman moving into our home, so Chelsea moved into our guest room, and my nightmare began. It started small. She'd come out in the morning in tiny shorts and a tank top, stretching and yawning, asking what was for breakfast like I was running a bed and breakfast. Brandon would laugh, say she was just comfortable, that I was being uptight. Then she started requesting specific meals. She didn't like my cooking, said it was too heavy, not fresh enough. Brandon would apologize to her and tell me to try harder. I was 7 months pregnant, cooking 3 meals a day for a woman sleeping down the hall from my husband and being told I wasn't doing enough. The power dynamic shifted so fast, it gave me whiplash. Suddenly, Chelsea was treating me like the help, and Brandon was allowing it. She'd leave her dishes wherever she wanted, ask me to do her laundry because she didn't have time, take hour-long showers in our main bathroom. I found myself shuffling to the guest bathroom in my own house because she'd taken over. And Brandon? He defended every single thing she did. "She's going through a hard time, Nia. Can't you be more compassionate?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them both out. But I was pregnant, exhausted, and somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself completely. I didn't know how to fight anymore. The morning I found them having breakfast in bed together is burned into my memory forever. I'd gotten up early, my back aching, my feet swollen, and I heard laughing coming from our bedroom, not the guest room. Our bedroom. I opened the door, and there they were, propped up against my pillows, eating pastries and coffee, watching something on his laptop. They barely looked at me when I walked in. Chelsea glanced up and said, "Oh, good. Can you grab us some orange juice? And maybe wash these sheets later? We spilled some coffee." I just stood there, frozen. And Brandon, my husband, the father of my unborn child, nodded toward the door and said, "You heard her, babe. Make yourself useful." Something inside me cracked that morning, but instead of breaking, it hardened. I went downstairs, I got them their orange juice, and I started planning. I stopped arguing. I stopped crying. I watched, I documented, I waited. Because I realized something important. Brandon thought I was defeated. He thought I was too tired, too pregnant, too dependent on him to do anything. And I was going to let him keep thinking that, right up until the moment I wasn't. 2 weeks became a month. Chelsea stopped even pretending to look for her own place. She started redecorating our living room, bringing her friends over, acting like the lady of the house while I cooked and cleaned around her. I heard Brandon on the phone one night talking about rearranging the living situation after the baby came. He was planning to move me to the basement guest suite, his pregnant wife, the mother of his child, to the basement. That's when I knew I needed to accelerate my plans. I'd been keeping records of everything, every dollar Brandon spent on Chelsea, every late night, every inappropriate text I'd glimpsed on his phone. I'd quietly consulted with a divorce lawyer, not to file yet, but to understand my rights. And I knew something that Chelsea didn't know, something Brandon seemed to have forgotten in his arrogance. His parents, Beverly and Thomas, were traditional people who loved me like their own daughter, and they'd been asking to visit for weeks. Brandon kept putting them off, making excuses, but I'd been talking to Beverly separately. She knew I was pregnant, she knew she hadn't seen me in months. She was worried. So when she told me they were planning a surprise visit that Sunday morning, I didn't warn Brandon. I just said I'd love to see them and made sure to be up early when they arrived. That Sunday morning, I got up at dawn. My body was tired, but my mind was sharp. I made a huge breakfast spread, set the table beautifully, and waited. Brandon and Chelsea were still asleep upstairs in my bed, tangled in my sheets. They'd gotten so comfortable, so careless. They thought they were untouchable. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 in the morning. I opened the door to find Beverly and Thomas standing there with gifts for the baby and flowers for me. Beverly took one look at my swollen belly, my tired eyes, and pulled me into a hug so tight I almost broke down right there. But I held it together. I invited them in, offered them coffee, and we were sitting in the kitchen catching up when I heard footsteps upstairs. Chelsea came down first, wearing one of Brandon's shirts and nothing else, her hair messy, yawning. She walked into the kitchen and stopped when she saw Beverly and Thomas. For a second, she looked confused. Then she looked at Beverly and said, "Oh, are you the housekeeper? Can you make me some coffee? And I take my eggs scrambled, not too dry." The silence that followed was deafening. Beverly stood up slowly, and I'd never seen her look so cold. "Excuse me? Who are you, and why are you half-dressed in my son's home?" Chelsea's face went pale. I'm Chelsea, Brandon's assistant. I'm staying here temporarily." Thomas was already on his feet, looking between Chelsea and me. "Nia, where is Brandon?" Before I could answer, Brandon appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. He froze when he saw his parents. His face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds: shock, fear, anger, then a weak attempt at a smile. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? Clearly you thought we wouldn't be here." Beverly cut him off. Her voice could have frozen water. "What is this woman doing in your home dressed like that? Why does Nia look like she's been working herself to death while 7 months pregnant?" Brandon started stammering, trying to explain, but Chelsea, in her infinite stupidity, decided to speak up. "Look, this is really none of your business. Brandon and I are in a relationship, and Naya has been very understanding about the situation. She's been helping out around the house while I support Brandon through his business challenges. I almost laughed at the audacity. Beverly looked like she might actually hit someone. Thomas held up his hand. "Chelsea, is it? I'm going to ask you to go upstairs and pack your things. Now." "You can't tell me what to do," Chelsea said, looking at Brandon for support. "Brandon, tell them." But Brandon couldn't speak. He was staring at his father, and something in his face told me he'd just remembered something very important. Thomas didn't just love me. Thomas had given Brandon the startup capital for his business. Thomas still owned 40% of everything Brandon had built. Beverly walked out of the kitchen, and I heard her going upstairs. She came back down 2 minutes later holding some of Chelsea's clothes from the master bedroom. "She's been sleeping in your room? In your marital bed? While your pregnant wife does what, exactly?" "I've been sleeping in the guest room," I said quietly, "for the past 3 weeks." Beverly's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady and cold. "Get out," she said to Chelsea. "Get your things and get out of this house right now, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing." Chelsea looked at Brandon, waiting for him to defend her, to choose her. And my husband, my coward of a husband, just stood there saying nothing. "You said you were rich," Chelsea hissed at him. "You said you'd take care of everything. You said she didn't matter anymore." And that's when Thomas spoke up, his voice like steel. "My son has a successful business because I gave him $500,000 to start it, and I still own 40%. Every property, every deal, every success he's had has been built on my money and my name. And if he doesn't fix this situation immediately, I will pull every cent, and he can start over with nothing." I watched Chelsea's face crumble as she realized Brandon wasn't the meal ticket she thought he was. She looked at me with pure hatred and said, "You're pathetic. You really think he loves you? Look at yourself." I smiled for the first time that morning. "At least I'm not homeless. Get out of my house." Chelsea grabbed her things and left, slamming the door behind her. Brandon tried to follow her, but Thomas blocked his path. "Sit down," his father said. "We need to talk." What came next was the most satisfying hour of my life. I pulled out my phone and showed them everything. Every receipt of Brandon's money spent on Chelsea, screenshots of romantic messages, photos I'd taken of them together, times, dates, witnesses. I'd documented it all. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I told them calmly. "I have enough for a very clean divorce that would leave Brandon with very little, especially considering marital funds were used to support his affair, but I wanted to wait. I wanted to see what would happen when the truth came out." Beverly looked at her son with disappointment I'd never seen before. "How could you do this? To Nia? To your own child?" Brandon finally found his voice, and of course, he tried to make excuses. He was stressed, Chelsea pursued him. I'd been difficult during the pregnancy. He still loved me. It was a mistake. He'd end things with Chelsea. We could work it out. But Thomas cut him off. "You have 24 hours to move out. This house stays with Naya. I'll be meeting with my lawyers tomorrow to restructure your business arrangement. You'll keep the company, but under very different terms, and you'll pay child support and whatever else Naya's lawyer says you owe. If you fight this, I will make sure you lose everything." I'd never loved my father-in-law more than in that moment. Brandon left that afternoon with 2 suitcases and his tail between his legs. Beverly stayed with me for a week, helping me prepare the nursery, making sure I was eating properly, treating me like the daughter she'd always said I was. We didn't talk about Brandon much. There wasn't much to say. My daughter was born 6 weeks later, healthy and perfect. Brandon came to the hospital, held her for 10 minutes, and left. He pays his child support on time. I'll give him that. His parents made sure of it. But he's a stranger to me now, and honestly, I prefer it that way. That was 3 years ago. I'm back to nursing now, part-time while my daughter is in preschool. The house is mine, bought out by Beverly and Thomas in the divorce settlement. Brandon moved back in with his parents for a while until he got back on his feet. I heard through mutual friends that his business struggled for a bit, but he's doing okay now. We co-parent our daughter, and he's actually not a terrible father when he's with her, which isn't often. Chelsea? Last I heard, she moved to another city and got married to someone else. I don't think about her much. But I think about that Sunday morning all the time. I think about how close I came to just accepting my situation, to letting them break me completely. I think about how powerful it felt to finally stand up for myself, even though I needed help to do it. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the people you think should defend you actually do. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. Single motherhood is hard. Co-parenting with an ex who betrayed you is complicated. But I'm free. I'm respected in my own home. My daughter is growing up watching her mother stand strong and refuse to be treated like she's worthless, and that's worth more than any marriage that required me to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. If you made it to the end, you need to hit that like button right now. Comment below. Team Naya, if you're proud of how this ended, or Team Beverly, if you love a mother-in-law who actually defends her daughter-in-law. Subscribe because I've got more stories about people who thought they could break me but found out exactly who they were dealing with. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone make you feel small in your own home.